The overhead light panel flickered again. Elias Dune kept his eyes on the datapad, counting the seconds between failures. 3 Mississippi. 4. 5. The bulb would die within the week, and station maintenance would replace it with another cheap unit that would do the same thing. Spire 7 was a station held together by patchwork and optimism. Dravos Mechan laid the datapad on the table. The sound was soft, plastic on polymer, but it cut through the hum of the environmental systems like a blade. 4 gray arms folded across a barrel chest. The Vethran stood motionless. A throat synth hummed once from a grill below his jaw. The flat notes settled in the room and stayed there. Kaelix Four-Scars shifted. The Gemery envoy's crystalline body caught the failing light and scattered it across the walls in pale amber fragments. A soft chime accompanied the movement. Pleasant, deliberate. Everything about Kaelix was deliberate. "The terms are itemized," Dravos said. His voice came processed and uniform. No emotion bled through. "Infrastructure upgrades to all 7 colonies. Full-spectrum defense against the Quartzar swarms." The swarms were clouds of razor-edged crystals. They stripped hulls in minutes and fed on electrical emissions. A guaranteed purchase price for extracted minerals at 0.3 above market average. Elias picked up the datapad. The numbers were generous, painfully generous. Any colony administrator reading them would feel obligation settle onto their shoulders before finishing the first page. New fusion baffles for the refining stations. Medical nanomedic upgrade kits. 3 additional cargo haulers with modern shielding. He read to the bottom. He read the fine print. The contract was beautiful. Dravos had hidden nothing and buried everything. The clean language hit a trap. A temporary operational control clause meant the Combine decided who worked when they worked, and for what pay. Temporary meant until the next contract renewal. Operational control meant the Combine owned the labor. 5 years, maybe 4. The colonies would become corporate labor camps. No one in the free systems would intervene because the contracts were signed willingly. Elias said nothing. He set the datapad back on the table. His left thumb tapped against his thigh. Once, twice. He kept his breathing steady. Kaelix chimed. The sound was like a wine glass struck with a fingernail, clear and resonant. "The offer aligns with Gemery standards of fair exchange, resources for protection, investment for access. The Quartzar threat is escalating, Elias. The Council has received 47 distress calls from the Thresher colonies in the last standard month alone. These people need help." "They need help," Elias repeated. His voice came out flat. "Not a lease agreement with a sunset clause." Dravos's throat synth produced a sound that might have been a laugh. It was wrong, too low, too even. "There is no sunset clause. The contract is perpetual with a mutual termination option at the 5-year mark. Standard language. Your people will have full legal recourse." Full legal recourse against a corporate empire with 300 years of legal precedent written by their own lawyers. Elias almost smiled. Almost. "I need 24 hours, he said, "to consult with the colony representatives." Dravos's head tilted. The gesture was subtle, but Elias caught it. The Vethran was pleased. He knew the colonies were scattered across 6 light towers of nebular debris. No real-time communication, no unified response. 24 hours was a delay, not a strategy. 24 hours, Dravos agreed. The throat synth pitch shifted. Satisfaction. "I will prepare the final documents for review at the same table tomorrow, mid-station cycle." Kaelix chimed again. "A wise approach. Consultation ensures buy-in from all parties. The Council approves of transparent negotiation." Elias stood. His chair scraped against the grated floor. The sound was tinny and wrong, echoing off walls too close and too thin. He left the room without another word. The corridor outside was empty. The lights here were better, newer bulbs, brighter panels, but the air still tasted of recycled metal and the faint chemical bite of cleaning solvents. Elias walked. His footsteps rang against the grates, left foot, right foot. The rhythm kept him grounded. Traditional diplomacy was dead. He had known it for 6 months, but sitting across from Dravos had made it real. The Combine had already bought the system. Every neutral party in the sector was either on their payroll or too intimidated to object. Kaelix meant well. Gemery always meant well. But his idea of fairness was calibrated against a scale that only weighed visible value. He could not see the weight of a future already mortgaged. There was no one left to appeal to. Elias reached the public comm terminal at the end of the corridor. A battered unit. Its screen scratched, its keypad worn smooth in the center. He keyed in a code from memory. The sequence was 7 years old. He had not used it since before the Thresher colonies were settled. The screen blinked, connection pending. He typed a single message. No greeting, no explanation, just 8 words, need transport, fast, negotiation. He sent it to a Valkris frequency. A mercenary clanship owed him a debt from a different negotiation in a different year. The debt was old. Old debts could be ignored. Old debts could be forgotten. Elias leaned his forehead against the cool metal of the terminal casing. The reply did not come. He waited, the screen stayed dark. The terminal hummed its quiet, indifferent hum. 3 minutes passed. 5. A station maintenance bot rolled past, its sensors chirping as it scanned the corridor for debris. No reply. Elias pushed off from the terminal and walked to his quarters. The room was small. A bunk. A desk. A viewport looked out onto the black smear of the Thresher Nebula, where 7 human colonies were about to learn the real price of someone else's generosity. He sat on the edge of the bunk. The screen on his personal comm unit was dark. He stared at it anyway, wondering if his old contact even remembered him, wondering if the debt still had weight. The light panel in the corridor outside flickered, then it died. Elias waited in the dark, watching a screen that refused to show him anything at all. The bridge of the Wind Dancer smelled of burnt lubricant and recycled ozone. Vethran Tan stood at the helm, one taloned hand resting on the thruster control. She watched a single screen flicker with a human face she had not expected to see again. The message had come through a back-channel relay. It had been routed 6 times to avoid Combine sniffers. 5 years since their last transaction. 5 years, and Elias Dune still looked like a man carrying something too heavy for his frame. She played it again. His voice crackled through the bridge speakers. Vethran, I need a ship. I need a pilot who asks no questions the Combine can trace. I can pay half what you are worth. You have 24 hours to decide. The message ended. The screen went dark. Her first officer clicked his beak from the sensor station. Tern was old for a Valk. His blue-black feathers were streaked with gray. 3 parallel scars ran from his left eye to his jaw. Humans are weak. They talk too much and pay too little. Vethran did not answer immediately. She let the vibration of the engines thrum through her boots. She felt the familiar heat of the cramped bridge press against her skin. The Wind Dancer was her clanship, her crew, her responsibility. Every decision passed through a narrow filter of survival. You worked with him before, Tern pressed. What did he pay you then? Nothing, he paid nothing. He helped us evade a Combine patrol ship when our coils were failing. He owed us nothing, but he did it anyway. Tern made a sound low in his throat. A loan, then, a debt of favor. Vethran turned from the helm and faced him. The Combine is moving on the Thresher Nebula. If those colonies fall, the Valkris lose our best fuel suppliers. We lose the only independent refueling stations between here and the fringe. We lose everything we cannot carry on this hull. Tern's feathers flattened. You think one human can stop the Combine? I think one human might be the only thing that tries. She walked past him and into the narrow corridor. Her talons clicked against the metal deck. The air grew drier as she descended toward the cargo bay. She could smell the docking sealant and the sharp tang of ozone from the atmospheric processors. The Wind Dancer was old. It was tired. It was hers. The cargo bay was empty when she arrived. Empty except for the single figure standing near the far wall, backlit by a faint emergency strip. Elias Dune looked older than she remembered. His hair was gray at the temples. His face was lined in ways that spoke of too many negotiations and not enough sleep. He wore a simple jacket, patched at the elbows. Nothing about him suggested wealth or power or influence. He looked like a man who had already lost everything, but had not yet stopped moving. Vethran stopped 10 paces from him. You came. You said yes, he replied. His voice was steady, flat, almost calm. She tilted her head, scanning him for tells. Valkris read posture before words, every muscle, every flicker of the eyes, every hesitation. Elias gave her nothing. He stood still and waited. I said yes, she acknowledged, but I want to hear the terms from your mouth. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. Half my personal savings, it is not much by Combine standards, but it is honest. It has no tracking codes, no hidden clauses, no repayment schedule. She took the chip and turned it over in her palm. The metal was warm from his body heat. What is the job? Take me to the Thresher Nebula, broadcast a message to the colonies on a secure channel, then wait. Wait for what? He looked at her then, really looked. His eyes were dark and tired and something else, something she could not name. For them to answer, he said. Vethran felt a laugh build in her chest. It came out dry and rasping, echoing off the cargo bay walls. That is your plan? A message? A story? You are going to talk the Combine out of a corporate takeover? No, he said. I am going to talk the colonies out of accepting one. She stopped laughing. She studied his face again, searching for the crack, the tell, the sign that he was bluffing or desperate or foolish. She found none. It was not desperation in his eyes. She knew desperation. She had seen it in 100 faces across 100 smugglers' holds and refugee stations. Desperation had a smell, a taste. A frantic edge bled through every word and gesture. Elias Dune did not have that edge. He had something else, something quieter, something harder. Certainty. She had never seen a human that sure of a losing hand. It unsettled her in a way she could not articulate. It sat in her chest like a foreign object, cold and sharp and wrong. She clicked her beak and extended her hand. I accept your contract, Elias Dune. Half your savings, 1 trip to the Nebula, 1 broadcast. I wait until you tell me to leave or until the Combine shoots us out of the sky. He shook her hand. His grip was firm and dry. That is all I ask. She turned and walked back toward the bridge. Behind her, she heard his footsteps following, lighter than she expected, a man with no need to announce his presence. Tern was waiting at the helm, his feathers still flat. You accepted. She settled into the captain's chair and pulled up the navigation console. Set course for the Thresher Nebula, relay buoy 12, maximum stealth. He did not argue, he knew better. He keyed the coordinates and the Wind Dancer's engines hummed to life. The jump was smooth. Vethran felt the familiar pull as the ship slipped into hyperspace. The stars stretched into lines of white fire. The vibration of the hull rose through her bones. She let Tern take the watch and walked to the galley. Elias sat alone at the small table, a datapad in his hands. His thumb moved across the screen, writing. She watched him from the doorway for a long moment. He did not look up. The galley light cast his face in sharp shadows. His lips moved slightly, forming words she could not hear, composing something, rewriting it, polishing it until it was exactly what he needed. She wondered what he was writing. She wondered if she would regret taking his credits. The hyperspace hum filled the silence between them. Vethran turned and walked back to the bridge, leaving him alone with his story. She did not ask what it said. She was not sure she wanted to know. The galley light buzzed. A single strip flickered at the edge of Elias' vision. He had learned to ignore it after the first hour. The table was bolted to the deck. The bench was hard beneath him. The datapad screen glowed in the dim space. He tapped his left thumb against his thigh, once, twice. Then he wrote another sentence and deleted it. Vethran Tan appeared in the doorway. Her blue-black feathers caught the bad light and made it look almost rich. She stood with her arms crossed, head tilted at that perpetual angle. You have been at that for 3 days, she said. Yes. What are you writing? Elias set the stylus down. The message for the colonies. She stepped into the room. The 2 off-duty Valkris at the far end of the galley looked up. One was young, barely past fledging, her feathers still soft at the edges. The other was older, scarred across one eye ridge. Vethran gestured at the datapad. Why does it take so long? You have been speaking human for 40 years. You know the words. It has to be perfect. A contract is 2 pages. A warning is 3 sentences. What are you writing? Elias picked up the stylus again. He did not answer. The young Valkris he had heard her called leaned forward. Her voice was light, unsure. What does it say, the message? He looked at her, then he looked down at the screen. He read a single line aloud. Once, a farmer refused to sell his field to the warlord. He paused, the ship's engines hummed, the bulb buzzed. The field was poor, the warlord was rich, but the farmer said no. Silence, the older Valk blinked his nictitating membrane. Kes tilted her head. What happened, she asked, to the farmer? The warlord burned the field, Elias said. Kes's feathers flattened against her skull. Then the story is over. No, Elias set the stylus down. Then the farmer's neighbors burned the warlord's granaries. The warlord left. The younger Valk looked at her companion. The older one said nothing. Vethran squinted. Her voice was flat. That is not a strategy. That is a children's tale. Elias nodded. It is the simplest story in human history, but it works when nothing else does. She stared at him for a long moment, then she shook her head and turned. "Leave him alone," she said to the crew, her voice carried. "He is paying for the passage, he can write his fairy tales." She left, the door hissed shut. The older Valk got up and followed, but Kes stayed. She sat at the far end of the table, watching him with those unblinking avian eyes. Elias went back to the datapad. The Combine owned the courts. The trade routes belonged to the Combine. Every politician on every council from here to the Veil was on their payroll. The only thing the Combine did not own was the word no. He stopped, he deleted the last line. Too direct, too angry. He wrote the field was poor. Better, that was the truth. The colonies had nothing worth conquering. Thin soil, unstable mining claims, a population so small it did not register on galactic census charts. That was exactly why the Combine wanted them. No one would fight for a poor field. No one except the farmer. Kes spoke again, her voice was softer now. "Why did you choose that story?" Elias did not look up. "Because the other species do not have it." "Have what?" "A story where the weak win by refusing." She was quiet for a moment. The engines hummed, the bulb flickered. "We have stories," she said, "but they end differently. The weak who refuses dies, that is the moral." Elias looked at her. "Then you need a new moral." He turned back to the datapad. He wrote for another hour. Kes stayed the whole time. Later, the galley door cycled. Thin footsteps, the hot smell of synthetic protein. Kes set a cup in front of him. The broth was gray and barely warm. It tasted like nothing he could name. But the ceramic was smooth against his palms and the heat bled into his fingers. She did not speak. She simply turned and left. Elias drank the broth. It was the best thing he had tasted in months. The next morning, the ship's systems hummed louder. The deck vibrated beneath his feet. A low shudder ran through the hull, the telltale groan of a corvette pulling hard on its thrusters. Elias climbed from his bunk and made his way to the bridge. Vethran stood at the command station, talons gripping the rail. Her feathers were pressed flat. Tension lined every part of her body. "We are dropping out," she said without turning. "The transit lane ends here." The view screen flickered. Stars resolved into a dense smear of gas and light. The Thresher Nebula. Its tendrils reached across the black like the strands of a web. And there, at the edge of the nebula's outermost arm, a shape. Blocky, angular, 3 times the size of the Wind Dancer, running lights along its spine, cold and white. A Combine patrol cruiser. Vethran's voice dropped. He knew. Elias stepped closer to the screen. The cruiser sat motionless, a wall between them and the nebula. Its weapons ports were dark. That meant nothing. They could cycle to active in under a second. "He knew the moment we filed the flight plan," Elias said. "Probably before we left Spire 7. "We cannot outrun that." Vethran's voice was clipped. "We cannot outfight it. We cannot hide in the nebula without a running start. We do not have to run." She turned to face him. Her eyes were narrow. "What else is there?" Elias looked at the Combine cruiser. He thought of the farmer. He thought of the burned field. He thought of the granaries turning to ash. He thought of a single word. "We talk." Vethran's feathers ruffled. "They will scan our cargo. They will find your signal disguiser in the bay. They will board us and seize the datapad and detain every living thing on this ship." "Maybe." "Maybe," her voice rose. "You have a plan or you do not. There is no maybe in a boarding action." Elias kept his eyes on the screen. The cruiser did not move. It did not need to. It was already between them and everything they needed. "You told me once that Valkris respect debts," he said. "Is that still true?" She went still, her beak clicked shut. "You saved my crew 5 years ago, a Combine patrol. You let me call it a favor." He met her eyes. "I am calling it now. Get me close enough to signal that cruiser. 1 transmission, that is all I ask." 1 transmission will not change anything. "It will change everything." She stared at him. The light from the view screen cast her face in cold blue. The ship's systems hummed. The nebula churned. "If this fails," she said, "I am executing you myself before the Combine gets the chance. If it fails, I will let you." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to the helm. "Take us in," she said. "Steady approach, weapons cold, shields down." The helm officer hesitated. "Captain, I know what I am doing." The Wind Dancer moved forward. Elias stood at the edge of the bridge, one hand on the rail. He watched the Combine cruiser grow larger on the screen. He felt the vibration of the engines through the deck plates. He tasted the stale, recycled air. He thought about the farmer. He hoped the story was true. The bridge of the Wind Dancer burned red. Alert lights painted every surface in the color of old blood. Vethran Tan stood locked in place, her talons pressed hard against the deck plates, watching the sensor display. A Combine destroyer sat directly ahead. Weapons charged. 2 more ships flanked it, one off each vector, forming a wall of gray metal and silent threat. Nothing behind them worth running to. Nothing ahead but that wall. The comm crackled. A Combine voice came through, flat and processed, every syllable clipped. Identify and state business. Vethran flexed her primary feathers against her shoulders. She keyed the transmitter. Wind Dancer, out of Free Systems Registry. Fuel stop. We are low on reserves and request clearance to the Nebula stations. A pause, the silence stretched. Then the voice returned. Hold position for inspection. A boarding party will be dispatched. Tern leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. Captain, we cannot outrun that. She knew the Wind Dancer was fast for a corvette. A destroyer was a different category entirely. 1 volley and they would be debris. 2 volleys and there would not be enough left to identify. She did not answer Tern. She did not need to. Elias Dune stepped forward from the shadows behind her station. He moved quietly for a human. She had noticed that before. His footsteps were soft, deliberate, as if he measured every inch of ground before committing to it. He said, broadcast the message. Vethran turned her head. Her eyes met his. On all frequencies, he said, including theirs. She stared at him. That will get us shot. He did not flinch. The Combine cannot fire on a civilian vessel broadcasting a simple story without breaking the Free Systems Treaty. Dravos will not risk it. He needs diplomatic cover for the annexation. She wanted to argue. The logic was thin. It felt like a prayer, not a plan. But she looked at his face. No desperation there, no bluff. He was calm the way a stone is calm. She had seen humans do stupid things before. This was not stupid. This was something else. She unlocked the broadcast. Every channel lit up. The display showed the signal bleeding out into the void, to the stations, to the patrol ships, to anyone with a receiver within light minutes. Elias stepped to the pickup. He did not raise his voice. He did not introduce himself. He just began. A farmer lived on the edge of a valley. The soil was thin. The rain came late, but he had a field of grain. His father planted it and his father before him. It was not much. It was everything. Vethran watched the sensor display. The Combine destroyer did not move. Its weapons remained charged, but it did not fire. The warlord came down from the mountain. He looked at the field. He said, "This land is mine now. Your grain will feed my soldiers. Your house will quarter my officers. You will work until you are empty." The comm line stayed open. No orders came. The farmer said no. Vethran stopped breathing. The story was simple, too simple. A child's tale told in a child's voice. She could not see how it would stop a warship. The warlord laughed. He burned the field. He left the farmer standing in ash and said, "This is what happens to those who refuse." Elias paused. The silence in his voice was heavier than the silence of the void. The farmer did not rebuild. He did not plant again. He walked to the neighbor's house. He told them what happened. The neighbor walked to the next house, and the next, and the next. By morning, every farm in the valley knew the story. The Combine destroyer held its position. Its guns stayed dark. That night, the warlord's granaries burned. All of them. The fire spread so fast that his soldiers could not stop it. The warlord stood in the ash of his own stores and understood that a single refusal repeated becomes a wall. Elias stopped speaking. The bridge was silent. Even the alert lights seemed dimmer. The static hissed through the open channel. Vethran watched the display. No movement, no firing orders, just the quiet hum of the Wind Dancer's engines and the soft breath of her own crew. She understood then. The weapon was not the story. The silence after the story was the weapon. That silence forced everyone to choose. The Combine had heard the message. Every captain, every operator, every soldier on that destroyer had heard a human tell a tale of a farmer who refused. Now they had to decide what to do with that knowledge. Dravos Mechan could fire, he could blow them apart. But the story would already be out. The colonies had heard it, the crews had heard it, they would repeat it. A single refusal repeated becomes a wall. The comm crackled again. This time the voice was different, flatter, harder. Vethran recognized the throat synth signature immediately. Dravos Mechan. You have made your point, the voice said. There was an edge beneath the flat tone, something new, something tight. Now we talk in person on my ship. Vethran looked at Elias. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply nodded as if he had expected this all along. She killed the broadcast. The red lights still pulsed. The destroyer still sat in their path, but the moment had shifted. She said, "You are going." Elias turned toward the cargo bay. He did not answer. He did not need to. Tern whispered beside her. That was the story he was writing. For 3 days, that was it. Vethran said nothing. She watched the human walk away, his footsteps steady and certain. She felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like she was watching a farmer walk toward a warlord with nothing but a single refusal in his hands. And the warlord was afraid. The overhead lights cast a cold glare across the polished table. Elias sat alone on one side. Dravos Mechan occupied the other, his 4 arms folded across his chest in a gesture of finality. The 2 guards behind him stood motionless, their weapons holstered but visible. The throat synth buzzed to life. Your broadcast violates Article 7 of the Free Systems Commerce Code. Dravos's flat voice filled the sterile room. I can have you arrested. I can have the Wind Dancer confiscated and sold for salvage. Elias kept his hands flat on the table. The faint vibration of the destroyer's massive engines thrummed through the deck plates, a deep, unending pulse. You have not done it yet, he said. Dravos tilted his head. His rubbery gray skin caught the light in an oily sheen. I am offering a second chance. Sign the mining rights agreement now. The broadcast is forgotten. Your Valkris friends keep their ship. Everyone walks away clean. The datapad slid across the table. It stopped in front of Elias. The screen glowed with dense paragraphs of legalese. He did not touch it. Kaelix Four-Scars flickered into existence at the far end of the table. His hologram cast a pale amber glow across the white walls. The Gemery envoy moved with his usual deliberate grace, each shift of his crystalline body producing a faint chime. The room's acoustics swallowed the sound too quickly. The modified version includes stronger protections for colony labor rights, Kaelix said. I reviewed it myself. The language is explicit. The Combine cannot override local workplace standards for a period of no less than 10 years. Elias picked up the datapad. He scanned the clause. It was planted on page 12, buried under sections about transport logistics and processing fees. The words were careful. They promised oversight committees and independent arbitration boards. They named specific penalties for violations. None of it was enforceable. The arbitration boards would be appointed by the Combine. The penalties required the colonies to file complaints through a channel that did not yet exist. The whole structure rested on trust. Trust did not belong here. He set the datapad down. There was a merchant once, Elias said. He sold bad grain to a farming collective. The grain was mixed with dockweed. Anyone ate it and got sick. The merchant knew this. He had diluted his stores to stretch his profits. Dravos's throat synth hummed with static. This is not the time for stories. The merchant had a contract, Elias continued. The contract said he was not liable for spoilage after delivery. Standard clause. Everyone signed it. The collective had no legal recourse. Kaelix's hologram flickered. The envoy's faceted body caught the light at a new angle. A farmer discovered the bad grain. He did not go to court. He stood at the market crossroads and told everyone what happened. He did not shout. He just spoke the truth to everyone passing. Kaelix murmured, the farmer lost nothing. He lost 1 season, Elias countered. But the merchant lost his entire trade route. No one would buy from him again. The contract did not matter. The law did not matter. One farmer refusing to be silent changed everything. Dravos's forearms uncurled. He pressed his palms flat against the table. He leaned forward. His throat synth buzzed with a lower register that sounded almost like a growl. The story is irrelevant. The Thresher Nebula has no market crossroads. You have no army. You have no fleet. You have a single damaged corvette and a collection of fragile domes held together by salvage and hope. Elias met his gaze. The colonies have already heard the first story. They know what a refusal looks like. If I sign a bad deal now, they will refuse to honor it. Every dome, every station, every rock with a breathing tube. They will reject the Combine's authority. Your contracts will be worthless. Your inspectors will find empty halls. Your mining equipment will arrive at facilities that no longer recognize your ownership." Dravos's throat synth went silent, the room filled with the low thrum of the engines. "You would have nothing," Elias said. "Not the minerals, not the infrastructure, nothing." The silence stretched. Elias counted his own heartbeats. 7 of them passed, then 8. He kept his hands still. Kaelix's hologram shifted. The Gemmery envoy raised one faceted arm, a gesture that approximated a human raising a hand in a classroom. "The Gemmery Council has already received independent reports from the Thresher Nebula." His voice carried a new timbre, something softer than his usual measured calm. "The colonies are arming themselves. They are converting mining drones into defensive platforms. They are stockpiling water and oxygen. They are prepared to fight." He paused, the amber light of his hologram pulsed once. "And they are doing it because of a single story." Dravos's head rotated toward the hologram. His throat synth clicked, cycled through 3 frequencies, and produced a flat tone that sounded almost like a question. "You told them you would verify this before the session," Kaelix said. "I did. The reports are authenticated. The colonies have no intention of signing any agreement negotiated under threat of force." Elias watched Dravos. The Combine Field Director's 4 hands curled into fists. His gray skin tightened across his knuckles. The throat synth hummed with a frequency that made Elias' teeth ache. Then Dravos stood. "The Combine will withdraw its offer." His voice carried no inflection, no anger, no defeat, just a flat statement of fact. He turned toward the door. "But this is not over. The Combine will find another way. Your story may work today. It will not work forever. We have patience. We have resources. You have a single ship and a handful of domes." The door slid open. The guards moved to flank Elias. "The numbers do not favor you," Dravos said. "They never have." Elias rose. He did not look back at Kaelix's hologram. He did not ask what happened next. He walked through the door and into the white corridor beyond. The destroyer's deck vibrated under his feet. The engines never stopped. They never would. He did not know if he had won. He did not know if he had merely delayed the war. The corridor stretched ahead of him. The guards walked in silence on either side. The airlock that led back to the Wind Dancer waited at the far end. Behind him, the conference room door slid shut with a sound like a tomb ceiling. The thrum of the engines followed him all the way back. The cargo bay of the Wind Dancer was a cold space. The bay doors stood open. The sharp tang of methane drifted in from the colony station beyond. A dim blue light from the gas giant filled the airlock, painting everything in the color of a deep bruise. Vethran Tan stood near the ramp. Her feathers pressed flat against her skull. She did not like docking at human stations. They smelled wrong. They felt wrong. But she watched the human woman named Maris Fen approach Elias Dune. Maris was thin and weathered, her face lined by decades of hard vacuum and harder compromises. She moved like someone who had forgotten how to hope. Maris stopped in front of Elias. She did not shake his hand. She just looked at him for a long moment. "It spread faster than the Combine expected," Maris said. Her voice was raw. "Every colony in the nebula heard the broadcast, every single one. They are all refusing to negotiate now." Vethran tilted her head. She expected Elias to straighten his spine. She expected him to accept the praise. He had earned it. He had given those colonies a weapon when they had nothing else. But Elias just let out a long breath. He looked older than 42 years. The gray in his hair seemed deeper. "No," he murmured. "You all did the real work. I just gave you permission to refuse." Vethran felt her feathers shift. That was not how power worked. Power was taken. Power was held. Power was leveraged into more power. That was the way of the free systems. That was the way of the Valkris. But this human was giving credit away. He was handing the victory to people who had done nothing but listen to a transmission. Maris turned to face Vethran. The woman's eyes were pale gray. They held no fear. "Captain Tan, what are the Wind Dancer's rates for a defense contract?" Vethran blinked. She had not expected the question. She had expected a handshake and a farewell. She had expected to leave this system with her debt to Elias paid in full. She quoted a number, a fair number, the number that would buy her crew new propulsion coils and 6 months of repair time. Maris did not flinch, but her jaw tightened. "We cannot afford that, not with the Combine cutting our trade routes, not with the Quartzar swarms pressing in from the eastern edge. We have nothing left to offer." The Quartzar swarms were crystalline organisms. They scoured exposed metal and dissolved unshielded structures. The colonies had no defense against them except the Combine's promised protection. Vethran opened her beak to respond. She would say business is business. She would say her crew's survival matters more than sentiment. She would say the words every Valkris captain says when a deal falls through. But Elias stepped forward. He moved between Vethran and Maris. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply spoke. The Valkris have a reputation for honoring debts. He looked at Vethran. His eyes were tired, but they held something hard. The Combine blockade would have destroyed the Wind Dancer if you had not broadcast that story. You took a risk. You stood between the destroyer and the signal. Now the colonies owe you nothing, but you owe them something. Vethran's feathers pressed flat again. Her talons clicked against the deck plates. That was not how contracts worked. That was not how the free systems worked. The Combine had not fired. The Wind Dancer had not been hit. No damage, no loss, no debt. But she looked past Elias. She looked at the cargo bay. Kes stood near the far wall, holding a data pad she was not reading. The young crew member's eyes were fixed on Vethran. Kes's feathers were relaxed. Kes was waiting. Tern stood at the ramp. The first officer's arms were crossed. She gave a single shrug, a small thing, a movement that said it is your decision. I am watching. Vethran looked at her crew. She looked at the open bay doors. She looked at the dim blue light and the cold methane air. She thought about the debt Elias had called in 5 years ago. She thought about the risk she had taken 3 days ago. She thought about the Combine captain. He had gone silent when the story ended. She did not understand it in economic terms. The math did not work. The profit margin was wrong. But she knew that if she walked away now, her crew would lose something. Not credits, not fuel, not a contract. Respect. Vethran turned to Maris Fen. Her beak opened and closed once. I will reduce the rate by 40%. The words felt strange in her throat. She had never offered a discount in her life. She had never needed to. The Valkris did not bargain from weakness. The Valkris did not give charity. I will make the contract for 1 year. Take it or leave it. Maris Fen stared at her. The human woman's face did not change, but her shoulders dropped. A tension that Vethran had not even noticed was suddenly gone. We accept. Maris' voice cracked on the last word. Vethran nodded once. She did not look at Elias. She did not want to see the satisfaction in his eyes. She had just been played. She knew that now. He had not hired her with credits. He had hired her with a story about obligation, a story about debt, a story that had made it impossible for her to say no. She could not explain it. She could not justify it to the Valkris Council. She could not write it in her log. But she had done it anyway. Kes walked over. The young crew member's footsteps were light on the deck plates. She stopped beside Vethran. That was good. That was the right thing. Vethran said nothing. She did not know what the right thing meant anymore. The right thing used to be survival. The right thing used to be profit. The right thing used to be simple. Now it was a woman with gray eyes and a crumbling station. Now it was a human with a parable and a tired smile. The cargo bay's speaker system crackled. The sound was harsh and sudden. Vethran looked up. The colony station's main screen flickered to life on the far wall. A face appeared in the display. Dravos Mechan, the Combine field director. His gray skin shimmered under the blue light. His throat synth hummed before he spoke. Colony Station Thresher 7, this is Dravos Mechan of the Vethran Combine. He paused, his 4 hands folded together in a gesture of finality. Effective immediately, the Combine is imposing a full embargo on the Thresher Nebula. No ships in, no ships out. This station and every station in this nebula are now under Combine isolation protocols. The screen went dark. Vethran stared at the blank display. The cold air from the open bay door wrapped around her. The sharp tang of methane filled her lungs. A full embargo, no trade, no supplies, no reinforcements. The colony was a prison. The Wind Dancer was trapped inside it. She turned to Elias. The human stood still, his face unreadable. His right hand tapped against his thigh. He had bought her loyalty with a story, but the Combine had just bought the entire system with a blockade. And Vethran Tan had nowhere left to fly. The heat pressed against him from every side. Elias Dune stood at the makeshift podium, a slab of composite propped on empty cargo crates. He looked out at the crowd. The repurposed mining cavern swallowed the light from a dozen strings of portable fixtures. Shadows pooled at the edges, but the faces were visible, hundreds of them. Miners, technicians, farmers, families, scared and angry and waiting. He gripped the edges of the podium. His palms were damp. They expect us to starve. His voice carried off the rough stone walls, bouncing back at him in overlapping echoes. They expect us to surrender. They have calculated the odds. They have run the projections. Every simulation tells them the same thing: we break in 6 weeks. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone coughed. A child shifted in a parent's arms. Elias waited. There is a third path. The murmur quieted. He had their attention now. He had earned it over 6 days of refusal, 6 days of standing in rooms with beings who saw him as a problem to be solved. But this was the moment that mattered. This was the hall full of real people who would have to live with whatever choice he gave them. We make the embargo cost more than they are willing to pay. Mari's Fen stood beside him, arms crossed, jaw tight. She had argued against this gathering. She had said hope is dangerous when you cannot deliver on it, but she had not stopped him. Elias looked out at the crowd and told them the plan. The broadcast would be continuous, every frequency, every language in the free systems. The same story over and over. A farmer who refused a warlord, a refusal so simple and so public that it could not be hidden. The warlord burned the farmer's field. The neighbors burned the warlord's granaries. We turn it into a symbol, he said. Something that spreads faster than any blockade. The Combine controls the ships. The Combine controls the trade routes. But they cannot control a story that lives in memory. For every day they starve us, the story grows. For every ship they turn away, the story spreads. The Combine's partners will hear it. The brokers will hear it. The creditors will start to wonder which side of the story they want to be remembered on. A woman near the front shook her head. Her voice cut through the quiet. You are asking us to die for a fairy tale. Elias met her eyes. I am asking you to live for one. The hall stirred. Skepticism. Fear. A few nods, hesitant and uncertain. He could feel the weight of their doubt pressing against his chest. Then a voice from the back, clear, sharp, familiar. The Wind Dancer will run the blockade. Vethran Tan stepped forward out of the shadows. Her blue-black feathers caught the light. She moved with the deliberate stillness of a predator who had already decided. Her crew stood behind her. Kess, Turn, 2 others whose names Elias had never learned. She stopped at the edge of the crowd and looked up at the podium. The cargo bay holds enough fuel for 1 outbound transit. No weapons, no escort. We will carry the signal to the outer colonies. They have relay towers. They can amplify the broadcast from there. Mari's Fen's mouth opened. It closed. She stared at the Valkris captain as if she had grown a second set of wings. That is a suicide mission, Mari said. Vethran did not blink. Yes. The word hung in the air like a blade. Elias felt something crack inside his chest. He had not asked for this. He had not expected it. Vethran Tan was a mercenary. Now she was offering her ship and her crew for a broadcast that might not work. She was looking at him, not at the crowd, at him. He nodded once. She nodded back. A colonist near the middle of the hall raised his hand. Gray-bearded, thick-shouldered, his hands stained with engine grease. He spoke without waiting to be called on. Why would the Combine care about a story? The question cut through the moment, real, practical. Elias straightened. The Combine cares about profit. Profit requires reputation. If the story becomes famous, their partners will start to question their contracts. The brokers will wonder if the Combine can be trusted. The creditors will adjust their interest rates. The Combine's value will drop, not because we fired a single shot, because the story makes them look weak, because the story makes them look cruel, and in the free systems, cruelty is bad for business. The gray-bearded colonist stared at him for a long moment. Then he raised his hand again. Not a question, a vote. I will transmit from the Eastern Relay. Someone check the power cells. The crowd murmured, shifted. Another hand went up, then another. Mari's Fen stepped forward and raised her voice over the rising noise. Signal Relay 1 is live in 5 minutes. We start with the first sector and cascade outward. Standard translation protocols. She turned and looked at Elias. Her face was unreadable. You have the podium for 1 broadcast, make it count. He had the farmer story. He had told it a dozen times in the last week, but this time was different. This time the people who would carry the story were watching. Elias cleared his throat. There was a farmer who lived at the edge of a warlord's territory. The warlord sent soldiers to demand a share of the harvest. The farmer refused. His voice was steady, flat, the story as fact, not performance. The warlord sent more soldiers. They burned the farmer's field. They left him with nothing. The farmer's neighbors watched. They had fields of their own. They knew that if one man could be destroyed for refusing, then none of them were safe. So that night, while the warlord's soldiers celebrated, the neighbors walked into the warlord's granaries. They carried torches. They did not say a word. The crowd was not breathing. When the warlord looked at his burning granaries, he saw the cost of a single refusal. He had not lost the war. He had not lost his army. But he had lost the thing that mattered most to him, the certainty that he could not be challenged. The hall held the silence for 3 full heartbeats. At the back of the hall, a flicker of pale amber light resolved into a familiar form, Kaelix Four-Scars. The Gemmery envoy stood motionless, his faceted surface catching the portable lights. He had not announced himself. He was just watching. The council was watching. Maris leaned in and whispered, "Signal live in 3, 2, 1. You are on all channels." Elias began to read the story one more time. He told the truth. When he finished, the silence stretched for one long moment. Then the cascade began. The recordings multiplied. The signals spread. Kaelix Four-Scars was gone. The space where the hologram had stood was empty, but he had stayed through the entire story. He had listened, and he had taken the tale with him when he left. Vethran Tan touched his arm. "I am leaving now." Her voice was quiet, final. He turned to face her. The crowd moved around them, a current of purpose and noise. "Thank you," he said. She tilted her head. "You saved my crew 5 years ago. That story, the one about refusing, it is not a children's tale, Elias. It is a manual. You just handed it to every species in the free systems." She stepped back. "Do not waste it." She walked toward the exit. Her crew fell in behind her. The heavy door sealed behind them with a thud of compressed air. Elias walked to the main screen mounted on the cavern wall. A feed from the station's external sensors showed the Valkris corvette rising on a column of blue-white flame. The Combine's blockade ships shifted position, angling their weapons toward the departing vessel. But the signal was already out. The farmer's refusal was traveling faster than any ship in the system. He watched the screen until the Wind Dancer vanished into the nebula's dark arms. The Combine ships held their position. No fire came. Then, one by one, the relay stations across the nebula began to hum. A farmer had refused. The neighbors had burned the granaries. The warlord was listening. The story was no longer his. It belonged to everyone who had heard it. And somewhere in the free systems, another farmer was already planning.